In this video, I'm going to be comparing the Dune franchise to the Freaky Friday franchise. The case of Dune, you have three movies, the 1984 version, and then Dune 2021 from Denis Villeneuve, along with Dune Part 2, which came out earlier on this year. The case of Freaky Friday, you have five different movies. The version from 1976, that's the first Freaky Friday movie, and then a new version came out in 2003. That's a remake of the 1976 movie. Then there's a version of Freaky Friday from 1995, which isn't as well known, as many people talk about it. It's not even on any streaming service, actually. It's on YouTube, but that's not exactly the most ideal way to watch it, as I learned when I watched that version on YouTube recently. You also have the 2018 Freaky Friday movie, which is on Disney Plus. That's a musical. Then there's a movie called Freaky that came out in 2020. It's Freaky Friday as a slasher, where you have a serial killer that ends up stabbing this teenage girl with a mystical dagger. That's what causes the body swap, meaning that in this case, rather than a mother and a daughter switching places, you have this grown man serial killer who's in the body of a teenage girl. Well, the teenage girl is in the body of this grown man who's a serial killer. I think that's a really interesting spin on the formula. This movie is the only installment in the franchise that really does something different, which I appreciate. When you look at high score for each franchise, in the case of Dune, Part 2 has the highest score of 92%. The case of Freaky Friday 2003 movie has the highest score of 88%. Dune wins here. Then when you look at lowest score, in the case of Dune, the 1984 movie only has a 37%. The case of Freaky Friday, lowest score is a 34% for the 1995 movie. Dune wins again. Then when you look at average score, Dune has an average of 70. Freaky Friday has an average of 68. Dune wins again. Then when you look at gap between lowest and highest score, in the case of Dune, you got a gap of 55 between lowest and highest. In the case of Freaky Friday, you got a gap of 54 between lowest and highest, meaning by literally 1%, Dune actually has the higher gap. So Freaky Friday does win this round, but because Dune already won 3 rounds, it's going to win this debate regardless of my personal opinion. But let's look at that now. Which franchise do I actually prefer? In the case of Freaky Friday, these are movies I enjoy. I think this is just a really fun premise that lends itself to a lot of funny situations. But in the case of this franchise, you basically have 4 movies that really are doing the same thing. There's not much differences at all between the movies. Sure, when it comes to the details, the exact way that things play out, they're not literally identical, but in each of these cases, you start off with mother and daughter that are not getting along, that are not able to see each other's perspective. Thus, there's a body swap so they can understand each other better. This experience leads to them engaging in perspective taking, or they understand each other better, understand each other's points of view better. And in the case of Freaky, this movie actually does do something different. By contrast, when you look at Dune, there's just not as much repetition here. I mean, part of that is because you only have 3 movies. But in this case, the version from 1984 seems to me to be not very good. I think the big reason why is because if a story like Dune, because of the fact that it's a complex story for an adult audience, it's not simple. When you make a movie that's only like 2 hours, 15 minutes long, I think that's just not enough runtime to tell the story effectively. That's the big thing that really hampered that older version. Plus, also, it came from a different time, so the visuals are probably going to be dated. That's pretty likely. In the case of Dune 2021 and Part 2, they actually commit to telling this story well, not watering it down at all. These are definitely sci-fi movies for adults with great acting, compelling story, layered, interesting, complex characters that are not simple, black and white, clear cut. In the case of our main hero, Paul Atreides, when you think about Dune Part 2, on the one hand, yeah, you want these people to these people in the desert to rise up against their oppressors, the horrible Harkonnens, who are clearly the villains. But at the same time, even though Paul Atreides definitely has good qualities, you can see how it's a good thing that he's leading these people in a rebellion against the Harkonnens, and you are rooting for him, sure, but at the same time, you see all the times in which you see all the ways that Paul is manipulating other people to get what he wants to serve his own ends. You can see his not so noble characteristics, especially when you get later on in the movie. You're like, ooh, this doesn't seem that good. And you also can look at everything going on and realize, oh, there's a lot of manipulation going on here, especially with the witches, Bene Gesserit specifically. You definitely see the problems here. So things are not simple. It's not like these people over here are clearly the heroes, these people over here are clearly the villains. No, there's more layers to it than that, which I really appreciate. And also, man, these new Doom movies are just fantastic on every single technical level. Production design, set design, shot selection, composition, cinematography, CGI, costumes, makeup. There's not a flaw in either of these movies, technically speaking. Every single frame is believable. And man, I got to see Dune Part 2 in theaters. Boy, am I glad that I did, because that movie is truly one that was worth seeing in theaters. Truly was worth paying for, because it's so good. I like how the filmmakers committed to making things believable, not overly relying on computers, making sure the things looked real, not fake. For example, when you think about the way that they did the sandworms, you see, oh wow, they put a lot of work in. The filmmakers were like, we're not going to do things the easy way. We're not going to cheap out or anything like that. No, no, no. We are going to put the work in. And you definitely see the work when you watch the movie. So I would definitely say I prefer the Dune franchise. I mean, I think that Dune and Freaky Friday are two very different things. I enjoy both of them for different reasons. I mean, yeah, if we're talking about which movie is more fun to watch, obviously Freaky Friday is just more fun. There's no way around that. Dune is definitely a heavier story that's not as lighthearted. There's not as much humor to it. But with Dune, you have two recent movies that are great. There's only 3 movies in the franchise, so it's not quite as repetitive as Freaky Friday. That'll wrap things up for this video. Actually, I will say that when it comes to the actor Timothée Chalamet, man, you really see how much of a range this guy has when he can both be a fun, lighthearted, whimsical character like Wonka and a much more serious character like Paul Atreides. I think that is really impressive.